applause is for you, for the Herculean effort that you've put in this year. I saw you. I heard you. I know how difficult each and every moment of it was. The uncertainty at times was more to bear. But here we are, almost at the other end of this temporary situation. It's wreaked havoc. It's caused us to change everything about who we are and what we do. But yet, we stand at this end, looking back at what's been done, at the unimaginably impossible. And this afternoon, I want us to imagine, as a result of that, what's still possible for TAFE New South Wales. Part of the incredible work you've done this year has been to operate your own MicroTAFE. You've literally, where possible, taken your work home with you, continued to do the incredible work that you do in a unique and ever-challenging way. But importantly, as difficult as it was, you rose to every one of those challenges. You found the possible in all the impossible. And this afternoon, we're not only going to celebrate the incredible work that you've done over the past months, we're also going to look forward. We're going to discover what it is we can take forward with us and what the world of tomorrow looks like from Education and TAFE New South Wales' point of view. Along the way, if there's a comment you want to make, I'd love you to jot that down. Can you precede that with the letter C when you type it into the comment section? And at the end of this, there'll be lots of time for us to chat and for us to go backwards and forwards on questions. If there is a question you want to pose, I'd love you again to pop it in the chat box, and can you precede that with the letter Q? Up until really recently, we had to be specialists in an area. We had to know something so well because it was difficult for us to retrain. It was difficult for us to relearn. And also, as a society and an employing body, it wasn't advocated that people should be allowed to change that dramatically. Today, we're almost generalists. We know lots and lots of things about lots and lots of things. But the reality is we use our online searches more than we ever have before. So the need for depth is slowly disappearing as we become generalists. Again, this is impacting on how and what we see education and learning to be. The other thing that we need to be mindful of is that we have always had 7 phases of life. Shakespeare spoke about it, and we have had incredible literature around it. But what we're coming to understand more and more every single day is that through every one of these phases, there's a different need for learning and education. There's a different need for experience and a different desire for how we go about it. Former years, we institutionalize education. We send our children to school. We teach them the basics. We teach them the grounding so that they can build on it. We then send our children into higher education so that they can formalize that and choose a path in the career. There was a time when that path was something we chose, and that had a 30 or 40-year lifespan. Today, the average tenure of the job is 2.7 years, and it's not unusual for people to then get another job using very, very different skills or making money in a very different way. We've also found now, as a species, we actually enjoy learning. We have access to understanding in a way that we've never had before, through the internet, through searches, through YouTube and other experiences. And now our 7 phases of life require ongoing learning. And there's a role in that for TAFE New South Wales. This year has proven to us that we can take the band on the road, that we don't necessarily just have to teach out of our physical premises, that we are more than capable of reaching people whenever and wherever to have discussions with them that are of use and of merit to that exact moment. We're going to have to explore how we extend our offerings, and of course, TAFE New South Wales offerings, to cater for all of these stages of life. There's also this notion, of course, this lived experience that you and I have had, the unimaginable when we've lived through COVID over the last few months. In a paper written last year, a Yale professor called Frank Snowden, he wrote about the reality that if we go back through history, at the end of every epidemic, as horrible as they were, as heinous as they were, as detrimental as they were, there was a huge uplift afterwards. And he writes, I think, quite eloquently, and in many ways prophetically, given again that it was last year's piece. He said in his paper that through an epidemic, we get to understand society's structure, its standard of living and its political priorities, which is exactly what we've done. Every day in the media, the one thing that was front and centre was education. It was always a question of what education would be. How can we get education back to what it used to be? Another thing that's happened, and this is regardless of whether there was COVID or not, is something I've been charting about for many, many years now. I talk about the reality that in our society, there are 5 basic pillars, 5 things that we need to achieve. And depending on how we go about them, really influences business and what it does. It influences education and what and how it needs to teach. It influences many, or in fact, nearly everything in our lives, because as humans, we're trying to respond and evolve these pillars. The first is information, the thirst for, the getting of, the using of, the being able to make sense of information. Energy. Our energy sources, of course, have changed through the millennium, and the ability to be able to harness energy, to use it, and to have it relatively inexpensively and available to all is an ongoing challenge. Food. The production of food, the storage of food, the ability to access food, all of those, of course, are human necessities, and our understanding of how we might do that changes through the ages. Transportation is the desire to move from where we are to where we need to be. Not just us, but our goods, our chattels, and everything around us. It also now includes the transportation of ideas, the digital space, and that's a huge evolution. And the last of the 5 pillars is health, our health and well-being. And certainly if we've learnt nothing else in the last year, the reality is that we are now all responsible for our own health and well-being, and expect to see huge accelerated change in this space alone. The thing that I was certain of before COVID, and certainly ever more so now, is that apart from the impacts we're going to see because of COVID, apart from the lessons that we learned, the acceleration that we went through, the ability to say we can before we say we can't, that these pillars were all ripe for change. Another of the things that I like to use is a formula. This formula talks about the reality of how we understand the future landscape. It's longevity, which for us now and for the people that we're educating is about 100 years is the average lifespan for our children moving forward. That speaks to a very different world. It speaks to a world of likely where there's very little retirement. It speaks to a world where we'll work most probably 70 to 80. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to be working for toil, but it means we'll certainly want to keep active and alive and doing things. Another is the reality that you and I have seen over the past few months, a dynamic life. Instead of having to compartmentalize ourselves, check ourselves into work, do work, and then leave and do other things, you and I have lived a very fluid life in the last year. We've literally been teaching, we've been learning, we've been cooking, we've been gardening, looking after people. We've been doing all kinds of things, making sure that we are on task and completing what we need to do within the deadlines, but living a dynamic life, no longer a linear life. And also the reality, again, as we've seen and experienced in the last few months, the necessity to be able to have multiple earning possibilities. For some, that will mean that they will be part of the gig economy, meaning that they will have what we might call part-time jobs or working to a particular task with a particular employer or subcontractor until it's finished. But for many, what it means is that we can't rely on just one skill anymore or one job. We have to be able to ply our wares across many different industries, many different jobs. And we've seen an enormous amount of people in Australia and around the world do exactly that. Look for their skills and look how else they might be able to offer and sell them. When we take all of those and we put technology behind it, technology again being the enabler, the thing that makes all of these things possible, all of those things combined mean that from now on, we are all lifetime learners. We no longer can assume that we will have one job for life, nor do we want it. We can't assume that we'll only be doing one thing, one skill set. And we also can't assume and don't want to rely on just one way to make money anymore. And we know technology is part of the ability we have to be able to do more than we did before. We also have had the experience, you and I, where we didn't quite know how to do something. We didn't know how to change the tire, or we didn't know how to bake the cake, or we didn't know how to thread a needle. And what did we do? We went online and we found a tutorial, we found a quick video, we found somebody that would tell us how to do it, and we followed them step by step. But we are looking now for education to be where and when is appropriate. TAFE New South Wales moving forward, I'm sure, will move into this space as well as the others that it does so well. This also will extend out to being able to offer micro qualifications, that by doing that task, by showing that you are capable of it and you have learnt the steps, there will be an auditing process that will give us the certainty that the person following those steps has in fact learnt what they need to learn and is capable of doing that particular task. There's also, based in that realm, the reality that single geographical qualification makes no sense anymore. That getting a qualification that just allows us to practice in Sydney or in Australia really doesn't open us up to the opportunities that are available online globally. One of the other big discussion points around education, certainly coming from the government and talked a lot about in press, and when I talk to parents and others, it's the word that comes up often, it's STEM education. I have nothing against, of course, science, technology, engineering, arts and mathematics, all absolutely vital, important building blocks in understanding the world ahead and how we might be able to manipulate change and find our way in it. No question about that whatsoever. But the other lesson we've learned this year and have known anyway is that we really need human skills. We need creativity. We need thinking. We need collaboration. We need communication. We need the ability to be able to think when the ordinary becomes impossible. How do we go and do the extraordinary? For me, that's why I think we need STEAM. I refer to STEAM as the energy that makes the engine run. We need to include a broader landscape of arts. Our students need to have a more holistic understanding of the world. They need to understand the context of what they're doing, not just the content. One of the big changes around, of course, and we're starting to see this already, although it's not as obvious as it might be very soon, is the notion that we will have on us, you and I, carrying our technology around, at the moment being a smartphone, we will have the ability for that smartphone to be a lifelong tutor or a lifelong coach. It knows everything about us. It knows where we're going, what we've researched, what we're hearing, what we've learned, the tests that we've done, the results we've had. All of that can be packaged into our smartphone. If we can marry that with a TAFE New South Wales learning management system or something similar, then we can put the two of those together. If we can have a holistic understanding of the learner through the lens of technology from birth to death, then we can make some really intelligent decisions about how that person learns best, what they already know, what they need to top up on, and where humans are best to intervene. And the technology itself will drive a lot of that. It will understand the curriculum and what's required. It will be able to pre-teach. It's human. It will be able to feed them information and be able to assure that the human has learned that content. And where not, it will ask for the wisdom of humans to come and help the task, meaning that you and I can be very specialized in making sure that we are assisting people in the best way possible and leave technology to do the routine work, being assured that the person is in fact learning what they need to know. There's a lot of talk, of course, quite rightly, about technology and technology being important in the learning landscape as it is everywhere else. And of course it is. But our conversation today, I think, is down a far more important path. And technology in and of itself is benign. It really offers and does nothing. It's only in the hands of humans, incredible people like you, that it becomes useful and purposeful. I love this example that proves that point. It's a recent example of a young student that, like everywhere else, has had to go online to learn. He was given all these lessons, and at the end of every lesson, there was a test. The first one or two tests, he did abysmally. He couldn't understand why he failed. He thought he had learned the lesson and was ready to take it. What he figured out really quickly was that it was his grammar, it was the syntax, it was the writing of a lot of information, a lot of words, which is what he would normally have to do at school, that was falling behind. It was actually stopping him from doing really well on the test. What he discovered was that these tests were being checked by an algorithm. And the algorithm was looking for keywords. Where it didn't find enough substance or enough keywords, it assumed the student hadn't learned enough and would fail or would downgrade their mark. What this incredibly intelligent, bright student did was to understand that he didn't need syntax, didn't need grammar. He just needed a whole lot of keywords and tags. And that's exactly what he did. He put together this word salad. To me, this is a wonderful use by a student, but a pure example of where technology alone really doesn't prove the case. It really doesn't evolve the education at all. It's the blend of the human and the blend of technology that does it so beautifully. There's much that you've had to do over the last few months. to ensure that you are able to continue to do what you do so well. You've built up your own rhythm. One of the things that I'm asking you for is for you to keep that rhythm moving forward, regardless of how we go back, regardless of what the world looks like ahead. What we have absolutely firsthand learned in the past few months is that you and I are capable of the most extraordinary things. I'm asking you, just like I've asked myself, to keep the momentum of the past. I've pledged to myself, and I'm hoping you'll make a similar pledge to yourself, to keep up with many of the habits that I've developed over the past 6 or 7 months. I've already started to catalogue all of my recorded classes this year for later use. I want to be able to repurpose them and reuse them, cut out 5-10-minute pieces, cut out 1-minute pieces, cut out explainers, do all sorts of things that in future semesters and years I'll be able to share with future students. I've also promised myself I'm going to keep trialling new techniques. I've had to over the past few months, as you've had to. We've really had to go on a limb many times, not sure what or how it's going to work, but just trying it anyway. Also, as I've done in classrooms, as I've done in boardrooms, as I've done on stage, I need to continually remind myself that I have to create engaging physical, virtual, and blended spaces. For the last few months, it's all been virtual, but we're going back into the physical classrooms, and there will be an opportunity at some stage for us to use both the virtual and the physical, depending on what it is we're teaching and to whom and where and when. And we are capable of doing all of that. I've also relearned that chunking is really important, breaking up lectures, slowing things down, and just teaching one discrete piece of information, then somehow refreshing or taking a break or doing something before moving on to the next piece. Also, that I've had to add spice by including media like videos, including polls, breakout opportunities, and just generally engaging the audience in all sorts of ways. Not different from the physical classroom. We always did that and were capable of it and did it particularly well. But we had to relearn that skill for the digital space. And also, again, as we knew before, but relearning, reinforcing the message that we have to always be responsible for creating more interactive and more approachable content. That's what I've promised myself to take out of this year, so that I'm sure that even with all of the terrible stuff that came before us, that there is some great learnings and some advantage at least. What matters is not what we had to do to keep TAFE New South Wales alive for the last months. That was important then. It's still important today. And again, thank you for doing all of that. But the journey is still ahead of us. What is it that you and I can now make out of TAFE New South Wales moving forward? How do we change education? How do we use the acceleration that's happened around us? How do we use the lessons from COVID to inform a new landscape of education? This is the perfect horizon point to do that. The expectation is that we will have changed. It will be difficult, almost impossible, and I hope never again caused by the reasons it was caused this year, to have such an opportunity to make change where it's required. We know as educators that what we pay attention to shapes our opinions and actions. It's exactly what we've seen this year, that we have had to remain dogged about ensuring education was at the forefront, ensuring that we could train and teach our students. So we've paid attention. We've shaped our opinion, and we've also shaped our actions so that they match and allow us to do what we need to do. It would have been all too easy to fold and walk away. You didn't, and that was incredible. Which leads me to believe that you and I are, in fact, not only in the landscape of education, but very, very firmly in the landscape of attention. In fact, you and I work in the attention economy. We've proven in this year that many, many things compete for people's attention. One of them is education. If we can make education accessible, if we can make education something people look forward to, if we can help them to find the purpose in it, then they will choose education over some other activity. I believe firmly that how we do something is transient. It falls away as soon as new technology, as new thinking, as soon as it becomes obsolete. And we've absolutely seen that this year. The physical classroom was no longer possible. The physical interaction was no longer possible. We had to go back instead, and we had to go into our well to find the answer to why we teach, because otherwise we would have given up. And you found that answer. And in finding the answer to why you teach, you then had the energy, the motivation, and the desire to rework and to find new ways of how to do things. Not only do you need to understand and dig deep to find why you teach, but also you need to dig deep to find out why your students learn. Because again, they could have crashed and burned. They could have stopped coming. They could have used excuses, but they didn't. They turned up. The why is the imperative in life. It's the thing that you and I must take forward out of this. Why we do it is so much more important than how. Because, as we've proven time and time again, the future is really about an attitude. It's about our desire and our willingness to shape it in advance of it happening. It's our desire and willingness to turn up, to do the hard work as you have done. The reality is that the future of TAFE New South Wales is an attitude. It's an attitude that you and I have. And I'm so looking forward to seeing what we take out of this, how we address the pillars of the world and society, how we look at the future of education, and how we come up with the most perfect response to what education will be as lifelong, ongoing learners, regardless of who we are, where we are, and what we do. So for now, the most important part of our conversation has come about. I'm going to hand over to Kerry, and more importantly to you, so that we can chat about the future of education.